Snow drifted thick and muffled across the ridge, coating everything in a heavy white blanket. Christmas Eve, 2023. Lieutenant Ohia Stroud flattened herself against the iced-over stone, each breath blooming into tiny clouds in the freezing air. The valley below looked like it belonged on a holiday postcard, but she knew it was seconds away from turning into hell. "Spectre, status," Captain Mason's voice buzzed in her comms. "Still at High Point 7, roughly 300 menors northeast of you," Aurora replied, her tone calm and even. She fine-tuned the scope on her M110, scanning the tree line. Something felt off. The woods were unnaturally still. No birds, no rustling, only falling snow. Delta Team's assignment was simple reconnaissance. Track enemy supply traffic moving through the pass, log what they saw, and be back before dawn. 8 soldiers slipping through hostile ground on a night when most folks at home were unwrapping gifts and sipping eggnog. Aurora always volunteered for Christmas duty. 5 years earlier, nearly the same date and same mountains, her younger brother Daniel had been killed in an ambush while trying to save a wounded man. He was 22, a medic, and died doing what he believed in. Every Christmas after that, Aurora returned to these frozen ridges. Some called it atonement. She called it unfinished work. Temps dropping, winds pushing from the northeast at 15 knots, she reported, eyes glued to her scope. Years of training had carved the habit into her. Wind, pressure, cold. Every detail mattered when you were lining up a 1,000-meter shot. "Copy, Spectre. Moving to Waypoint Delta in 5, Mason answered, tension edging his voice. After 3 years running Delta Team, he trusted his gut, and right now, it was warning him hard. Aurora tracked the squad below, their winter camo fading into the snow. Sergeant Owen Parker took point, sweeping the terrain with methodical precision. Corporal Jennifer Walsh and Private Marcus Chen covered the flanks. Solid troops, young but sharp. She'd worked with far worse. Then she spotted it, metal glinting among rocks about 200 memoirs east of them. Then another, and another. "Mason, halt your team. You've got company." "What have you got?" "Multiple firing positions. East Ridge. They're dug in and watching you." Her pulse ticked up, but her hands remained steady. She scanned again, counting silhouettes, noting weapons. PKMs, RPGs. At least 20 fighters, maybe more. "This isn't random movement. It's a planned ambush." "Can we bypass?" Aurora ran quick routes through her mind. The valley ahead narrowed into a perfect kill box. To the north, vertical cliffs. To the south, a wide stretch of exposed ground, trapped either way. "Negative. Move forward and you're done. Pull back and—" The night erupted before she finished. Tracers tore through the darkness like flaming wasps. Automatic fire shattered the quiet, snow bursting upward where rounds struck. Aurora's jaw tightened as she watched Delta dive behind rocks far too small to offer real safety. "Contact! Contact! 3 o'clock!" Parker called out, steady even under fire. Walsh shouted over the gunfire. Aurora locked onto the attackers. These weren't local fighters. Their discipline, their timing, the coordinated bursts, they were professionals. Their mismatched gear only confirmed it. Red Serpents. The mercenary group notorious for hunting American Spec Ops teams. Ruthless, efficient, lethal. "Mason, pull back now," Aurora said, already calculating wind and angle on the nearest shooter. "We're pinned. Any movement gets us shredded." She could see it playing out. A slaughter in the snow, unless someone tipped the balance. Through her scope, she studied their formation. This was no chaotic firefight. Every burst was designed to cage Delta Team while a flanking group slid into place. "Spectre, movement on the South Ridge," Walsh's voice cut through the chaos. Aurora swung her scope. Another group, at least a dozen fighters slipping through the rocks. In 5 minutes, maybe less, Delta would be caught in a perfect crossfire. No escape, no survivors. "Mason, You've got a flanking element south. 10 minutes, tops, before they close the ring. God damn it! Spectre, give me options! Mason snapped, desperation bleeding through. We can't stay pinned here. Aurora scanned again, searching for the one person who always mattered most, the commander orchestrating the attack. Aurora needed only one thing: locate the commander, drop him, and throw their entire assault into confusion. But where was he? Then she found him, about 600 members out on a raised perch behind the main group. He wasn't firing. He simply observed, signaling, directing. A radio in one hand, binoculars in the other. Even from this range, Aurora recognized the posture. Calm, sure of himself, absolutely convinced the fight was already decided. She zoomed in further. The man looked around 50, his face a roadmap of old scars, his eyes cold, almost luminous in the dark. His gear set him apart. Higher quality uniform, strange insignia she didn't recognize. She didn't need to. She knew exactly who he was. The Red Serpent's commander, the architect of the ambush, the reason Delta was minutes from being wiped out. Mason, visual on their leader, Aurora murmured. Looks like the one they defer to. Can you make the shot? Mason asked. Aurora reassessed. Range just over 640 meter. Wind steady at 15 knots with bursts hitting 20. Snowfall cutting clarity, minus 12 degrees and dropping. The man kept slipping behind rock cover, showing only his upper half now and then. Tough, but doable. The situation below worsened by the second. The southern flanking line advanced quicker than she'd projected. Delta had to be burning through ammo. Then she saw Chen take a round, Walsh hauling him behind a stone outcrop, Red already soaking through the snow. Possible, but not clean, Aurora answered. Conditions are degrading. A thunderous blast shook the valley. RPG. The enemy had escalated. Retreat, Mason barked. Everyone fall back, fighting withdrawal to rally point. Aurora followed Delta's movement through her scope as they began peeling backward, firing in bursts, snow kicking up around them. The Red Serpents closed in with ruthless speed, sensing the moment they could crush them. Chen slipped. Walsh tried grabbing him, but the incoming fire forced her flat. They were 50 meters off the rest of the formation and seconds from being cut away entirely. The commander stepped fully into sight now, energized, shouting orders. His troops surged harder. Certain victory was at hand. Aurora's finger settled against the trigger. Protocol said to fall back, regroup, call for support, live to fight again. But Chen and Walsh weren't getting another fight. They barely had minutes. And 5 years ago, in these same mountains on Christmas night, no one had taken the shot that might have saved Daniel. She wasn't letting history repeat. Spectre, do you copy? Pulba. Mason's voice vanished as she muted her radio. She stood, fully exposed along the ridgeline, snowflakes clinging to her lashes, wind clawing at her gear. Below her, the battle flashed and roared, muzzle fire strobing in the storm. Aurora stepped forward, toward the chaos, not away. She slid into prone behind a new cluster of rocks, 40 meters ahead of where she'd been. Better view, closer distance, far more risk. She didn't care. The bipod snapped open with a practiced motion, and she braced the rifle into her shoulder like reconnecting with an old companion. Through the scope, everything funneled into one point. The commander had shifted positions again, now near a field radio. He barked commands, pointing toward Delta's retreat. His unit intensified fire instantly. Range now $580 mer. Aurora's breath steadied. Inhale, exhale, repeat. Her heartbeat slowed to a controlled rhythm. Her body transformed into the stable platform she'd trained it to be. A memory hit her. Daniel's final transmission, Christmas Eve, 5 years earlier. Aurora! Aurora! If you can hear me! Then static, a scream, and silence. She had been 300 kilometers away, drinking hot chocolate in a warm barracks, laughing at something dumb, while her little brother froze in the dark, calling for her. She shoved the memory aside. Focus, wind, distance, cold, the data that mattered. The commander angled sideways, giving her a profile view. A clean shot, but only for a few seconds. Aurora centered her crosshairs on his chest. Midline. The wind blew snow across the lens, and she clicked one notch right. Finger tightening. First stage tension. The rifle begged to fire. She waited for the beat where her pulse paused. For a breathless instant, the entire world stopped. No gunfire, no shouting, just her point of aim and the one decision that would change everything. She pressed through. The rifle cracked. The recoil nudged her shoulder. Familiar, grounding. She stayed in the scope. At 5:80 m, the bullet needed just over half a second to arrive. Through magnification, it felt like the slowest half second of her life. The 7.62-151 NATO round sliced through the stormy air, cutting across the falling snow. Aurora had accounted for drift, drop, even how the cold thickened the air and altered burn rate. The commander kept shouting orders, unaware death was already en route at 2,600 feet per second. She saw the strike. The round punched into the top of his chest, just under the collarbone. His body jerked violently, radio flying free and skidding into the snow. He stayed upright one last heartbeat, rage shifting to confusion before his face blanked, and he collapsed. Everything changed instantly. The radio operator beside him froze, staring at the fallen commander in shock. The disciplined fire that had been slamming into Delta Team faltered, hiccuped, then unraveled completely. Fighters turned in confusion, waiting for commands that would never come. Aurora had just severed the Red Serpent's head. She cycled the bolt, slid in another round, and immediately searched for whoever might seize control next. Someone would try to step up. She needed to catch him before he rebuilt their momentum. Down below, Mason spotted the shift instantly. Their hesitation was all he needed. Push forward! Push forward!" he ordered, and Delta Team, who'd been seconds from full retreat, surged back with fresh aggression. Aurora located her next target, a lieutenant screaming orders near a primary PKM nest. She made quick wind and distance corrections, squeezed, and watched him fold. Panic rippled through the Red Serpent ranks. Without their leader, without their second, they were no longer a machine, just scattered fighters taking sniper fire from a ghost they couldn't see. Some bolted, others hit the dirt and stopped shooting entirely. Aurora kept moving. RPG gunner bracing for a shot, down. Radio man reaching for the handset, down. Another officer trying to pull the remnants together, down. Each round was cold, exact, detached. She felt nothing, not victory, not regret. Only numbers, distance, wind, the physics of ending lives. "Spectre, I don't know what the hell you're doing up there, but don't stop," Mason yelled, riding the sudden hope in his voice. Aurora didn't reply. She was already lining up another shot. The Red Serpents cracked. First a handful ran, then clusters, and finally, their entire formation collapsed into a disorganized retreat. Delta Team pushed carefully through the battleground, clearing positions, checking bodies, gathering whatever intel they could. Aurora stayed on overwatch, her hands stiff with cold. Snow had piled on her back and shoulders, turning her into another white ridge shape, nearly invisible. What remained was cleanup. She'd fired 11 shots, scored 11 kills, and the night still had more ahead. When the firing finally died, Aurora made her way down from the ridge. Her body protested after the long, frozen stillness, but she pushed through it, scanning for threats. "Spectre! Spectre! Holy hell, that was incredible!" Sergeant Parker spotted her first, grinning through the dried blood on his arm. "Craziest thing I've ever seen," Aurora gave a small nod. Status. Chen caught one through the shoulder. Walsh patched him up. He'll pull through. The grin faded, replaced by something more solemn. "Because of you. If you hadn't..." "Where's Mason?" Parker pointed to a rock cluster where the Serpent's command element had been. Aurora found Mason standing over the commander's corpse, a folder in his grip. His face was stone. "Hell of a shot, Spectre. Look at this." He handed her the folder. Inside were maps, orders, comm grids. Her Russian wasn't great, but it didn't need to be. Her stomach tightened. "This wasn't just an ambush," she murmured. "No," Mason said. "It was a coordinated strike. 12 teams, all, set to hit NATO positions in the next 48 hours, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, when most bases were running skeleton crews." Aurora flipped through the pages. Targets included 3 forward bases, 2 major supply points. Then she froze. "Mason, here." She tapped the final sheet. A civilian settlement, 15 kilometers southwest, circled in red with a handwritten note in Cyrillic. "What's it say?" Mason asked. "Diversionary terror action. Maximum casualties. Execution time, 0600 Christmas morning." Aurora checked her watch. 4 hours. "They're planning a massacre while launching the main offensive," she said. Mason clenched his jaw. "We've got to get this up the chain. Call for air, QRF, anything they can scramble." "Comm's unreliable in these mountains," Aurora countered. "By the time approval comes—" "I know." Mason looked over his people. Exhausted, frostbitten, low on ammo, 1 wounded. Then he looked back at Aurora. "Can we reach that town in 4 hours?" Aurora studied the map, tracing elevation lines and valley routes in her head. "Barely, but only if we push non-stop." Mason didn't hesitate. "Then we move." He keyed his mic. "All personnel, rally up. New mission." Delta team regrouped, faces pale with cold but resolute. Mason outlined the situation in 2 clipped sentences. No arguments, no hesitation. This was exactly why they wore the uniform, to stand between civilians and the monsters who hunted them. Even on Christmas, especially on Christmas. "Spectre," Mason said quietly as he checked his gear. "That commander shot you made. I've led teams for 15 years, never seen anything close." Aurora adjusted her rifle sling. It was within operational limits. Within limits? That was a 1,000-meter miracle in a blizzard. Uphill with 580 meters, Aurora corrected. Mason paused. "The intel report was wrong. Actual range was 580. And it wasn't uphill. It was level with a 7-degree deflection for magnetic interference affecting the optic." Mason stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "Spectre, you are terrifying." "I know." They moved out into the night, leaving the fallen behind them as they pushed toward the next fight. The snowfall had tapered off, but the sky stayed choked with clouds. No stars, no moon, only the endless pale terrain ahead and the certainty that another fight waited somewhere in it. Aurora moved at the front beside Parker, her night vision goggles bathing everything in washed-out green. Walsh kept Chen moving despite his injured shoulder, while the rest of the team fanned out in formation, rifles at the ready. The pines were thick here, their limbs sagging under heavy snow. Aurora advanced cautiously, scanning for pressure plates, wires, any hint that the Red Serpents had secured the route. They wouldn't have left such high-level plans unprotected. Her suspicion was confirmed a kilometer in. A pressure mine lay buried beneath the snow, detectable only because of a faint, unnatural dip in the surface. "Hold," she signaled, and everyone froze. She marked the mine and guided the team around it. But her instincts wouldn't quiet. One device meant more, and multiple traps meant someone expected movement through this very corridor. "Eyes open," she whispered into her mic. "We're in their territory now." The attack came 10 minutes later. Muzzle flashes burst from the tree line to their left. Aurora threw herself behind a fallen trunk as bullets shredded the bark above her. Delta team answered immediately, tracer rounds ripping sideways through the dark. "Left side! Left side!" Parker shouted. Aurora rolled to a fresh angle behind a tree. Through her NVG, she caught four fighters using the dense forest for cover. More red serpents, but these ones had better vantage points and obviously knew the ground. She dropped the closest shooter, shifted, and fired again. Another down. The last two fell back deeper into the forest, using controlled bursts and bounding maneuvers to peel away. This wasn't the panicked retreat from earlier. These were disciplined operators, waiting for them on purpose. "Why are they here?" Walsh muttered, echoing Aurora's own thoughts. Middle of nowhere. Aurora glanced at the map again. The location where they'd encountered the first trap matched a waypoint marking. "This is a staging zone," she said. "They're using it to coordinate the Christmas offensive." Mason's tone darkened. "Which means more of them nearby. And they know we're heading toward the town." Aurora slammed a fresh mag into her rifle. "They'll try to slow us just long enough to fail." Despite his injury, Chen growled, "Then we outrun them." And so they did. Delta Team forced their way through the forest at a brutal pace, following frozen streams and narrow game trails. Aurora pushed ahead as a scout, dropping threats before they reached the main squad. Twice more they hit resistance, small fire teams meant only to delay them. Aurora took them out efficiently, but every skirmish drained their precious minutes. As dawn approached, and they reached a ridgeline 2 hours before sunrise, Aurora halted. Below lay the town, maybe 300 buildings, timber houses capped with snow, a church with a lone bell tower, a handful of Christmas lights still glowing in windows, where families had stayed up late without realizing death was scheduled to arrive at first light. "There," Parker said, pointing east. Through Aurora's scope, she caught sight of military trucks hidden under camo netting and silhouettes bustling around them, the red serpents assembling for their strike. Mason counted fast. 30 fighters at least, maybe more inside the vehicles. "We're outnumbered 4-1, Walsh murmured. "Yeah," Mason answered quietly. Not a soul suggested backing off. Not one mentioned reinforcements that couldn't possibly make it. They'd come this far to stop a massacre, even if it meant walking into impossible odds. "We need to tip the balance," Aurora said softly. She studied the positions, noting habits, gaps, and vulnerabilities. "Give me 15 minutes. "To do what?" But Aurora was already slipping away. "Fix the math." The forest between them and the town was old pine, giants that had stood for centuries. Thick trunks, a canopy still heavy even in winter, deep pockets of snow broken by bare patches. Perfect ground for someone like Aurora. She glided forward like a ghost, learned movements she'd picked up from her grandfather, who'd hunted these mountains before war reshaped them. How to step without snapping twigs. How to let the wind mask small noises. How to simply disappear from the landscape. The serpents had sentries posted. She encountered the first 50 meters into her approach. Young, maybe 20, focused entirely on the ridge where he'd last seen Delta Team. He never expected a threat behind him. Aurora rose from the snow, like a pale shadow. One swift cut, silent, final. Then she moved on. The second sentry was sharper, constantly scanning. Aurora waited, still as carved stone, for 10 long minutes until he flicked a lighter. The spark ruined his night vision for a single heartbeat. That heartbeat was all she required. 2 down. But the third sentry presented a real obstacle. He wasn't stationed by himself. A second guard stood roughly 15 meters off, positioned so that either one could see the other if anything went wrong. Smart layout, the kind that kept fighters alive. Aurora watched them for 5 full minutes, memorizing their rhythm. Their patrol wasn't predictable. Every few minutes they shifted around, never lingering in one place long enough to establish a pattern. Trained discipline. She'd have to take another approach. Aurora crawled to a perch about 60 meters out, slightly elevated, giving her a thin view on both guards. The angle wasn't ideal. Trees blocked portions of the lane, The men kept moving, and the margin of error was tiny. She stabilized her breathing and settled in, waiting for the single moment the forest might give her. It arrived. Both sentries paused at the same instant, facing opposite directions, creating a fleeting 3-second blind gap between them. Aurora squeezed off 2 shots. The first round punched through Sentry 3's head, dropping him instantly. The second round clipped Sentry 4 as he started to turn, catching only a faint instinct that something was wrong. He twisted halfway before Aurora's bullet ended him. 3 minutes later, she was back with Delta Team. 4 sentries neutralized, she reported. Path is open. Mason gave her a look that said he wasn't sure whether to be impressed or concerned. Good. Here's our plan. A deep, mechanical thrum cut him off. Not gunfire. This was heavier. Aurora jerked her head upward. Helicopter! Walsh shouted. Aurora spotted it. An inbound military transport sweeping low over the treetops, arrowing straight toward the Serpent's staging zone. Reinforcements. They're loading troops, Parker said, raising his binoculars. Looks like 20 more fighters boarding, 50 Serpents instead of 30. The numbers kept getting worse. Aurora processed it quickly. Mason, I need to move now. Where? She pointed toward the church tower, the only structure tall enough and open enough to give eyes on the entire staging area. There. That's inside the town, right in their kill zone. I know. Mason held her gaze for a long second. You're going alone. You have to lead the assault, and I work best at distance. Aurora checked her mag. Give me 20 minutes. When you hear my first round, that's your go. Spectre. 20 minutes, she repeated, already fading into the trees. Use them well. She vanished before he could argue. The dash toward the town was brutal. Aurora drove herself harder than she had in years, lungs raw, legs hammering against snow that sometimes climbed to her knees. She avoided the roads, far too exposed, almost guaranteed enemy contact. Instead, she wove through backyards, vaulted fences, threaded between homes. A dog barked as she passed. Somewhere, a baby cried. Normal life, unaware of the slaughter scheduled with the sunrise. The church stood in the town's heart, ancient stone wrapped in winter ivy, Christmas wreaths on its doors. Aurora tried the main entrance, locked. Side door, locked. No time for gentleness. She cracked a small window with her rifle stock, reached in, and turned the bolt. The shatter of glass felt loud enough to echo across the valley. She slipped inside and shut the door. The interior was dim, lit only by candle flames flickering near the altar. Incense and old timber scented the air. Aurora found the spiral stairs and climbed fast. The steps were narrow, meant for bellkeepers, not armed operators. But she forced her way up. The tower room was tight, barely 3 meters wide, with narrow slits facing all directions. Perfect. She took the eastern window, the one overlooking the Serpent's staging point. 12 minutes until the assault. Aurora prepared with muscle memory. Bipod out, rifle anchored, scope adjusted, spare mags arranged where she could reach without looking. She checked the gathering below through the lens. The enemy force was fully mobilized. Fighters checking rifles, loading gear, pulling on assault rigs. The helicopter was disgorging more troops. She counted quickly. 53 armed combatants. Delta Team had 7, and 1 was wounded. The math was ridiculous. But that's what long-range shooters existed for. Tilt the impossible. She prioritized targets. Leadership first, then NCOs, then specialists, drivers, machine gunners, radio hands. Remove the structure and even superior numbers fell into chaos. Aurora checked her watch. 8 minutes. She slowed her breathing, coaxing her pulse downward until everything narrowed into that clean mental space. 6 minutes. Daniel's voice flickered through her mind. You're going to get yourself killed, sis. Probably, she thought, but not before I save who I can. Classic Aurora, the memory teased. Always the hero. Not a hero, she told the voice. Just still breathing. 4 minutes. The serpents began loading the vehicles. The attack was starting early, either suspicion or impatience. 2 minutes. Her finger settled on the trigger. She chose her first target, the officer overseeing the loading. Drop him and their entire operation would stall, while they scrambled for a chain of command. 1 minute. The officer stepped clean into view, barking at his men. Aurora placed the crosshairs on his chest. And then, the church bell above her boomed a single enormous note, vibrating the whole tower. Aurora jerked, the shot spoiled. She blinked upward, startled. Who hit the bell rope? Then it clicked. Christmas morning. 0500 hours. The automated bell announcing the holiday to the sleeping town. The bell tolled again, then again, the sound rolling for kilometers. The serpents snapped their heads toward the tower, saw her silhouette. "Sniper!" someone yelled in Russian. "Sniper in the church!" Aurora fired without thinking. The officer collapsed, but her element of surprise was gone. Fighters scrambled, rushing for cover, weapons turning toward the tower. Rounds smacked into the stone. Window glass exploded. Aurora rolled aside as bullets shredded the frame where her head had been. Mason's voice crackled through her radio. "Spectre, we heard shots. Are you compromised?" "Affirmative. They've made me. Execute the assault." "Negative, we're 3 minutes out." "Mason, they'll level this tower. Move now or this was pointless." A beat. Then, "All units, assault, assault, assault." Aurora lunged back to the eastern window, firing as fast as she could while rounds peppered the stone. She aimed for vehicles first. Take out tires, drivers, mobility. Shots weren't perfect, but she didn't need perfect, just damage. A tire burst. A windshield imploded. A gunner reaching for a mounted weapon spun and dropped. The bell kept roaring above her, unreal and dreamlike amid the chaos. Christmas morning announced by gunfire. Delta team hit the serpents from the western flank of the staging zone. Aurora picked up the sharp, familiar crack of American M4s, followed by the low thump of Parker's grenade launcher. The enemy formation, already destabilized by her precision fire, finally buckled under Delta team's assault. But 50 fighters against 7 was still a nightmare ratio. She saw Mason at the front, firing steady, controlled bursts, Walsh laying protective fire beside him, and Chen, somehow, keeping up despite his shattered shoulder. The Red Serpents shook off their shock and started to regroup, leveraging their numbers and stronger defensive ground. A PKM roared to life, its heavy rounds forcing Delta Team flat into the snow. Aurora pivoted to the gunner and fired 3 rapid shots. One found home, dropping him, but another immediately stepped up, and then another. "Spectre, we're pinned!" Mason barked, strain cracking through. "Can't push with that MG locking us down." The PKM hid behind a concrete barrier, exposing only a sliver of the gunner's head and upper torso. A tough angle, though Aurora had made tougher. She steadied her breathing, running wind and distance in her mind. Before she could send the shot, an RPG arced toward Delta's position. Aurora watched helplessly as Mason threw himself in front of Walsh, shielding her from the blast. The explosion ripped through the snow. "Mason! Mason, respond!" Aurora's voice broke for the first time that night. Static. Then, "Spectre!" Mason's voice was gurgled, uneven. "I'm hit bad." "How bad?" "Bad enough. You need to finish this. They need you to finish this." Aurora found him through her scope, collapsed in the snow, blood spreading dark beneath him, Walsh dragging him toward cover, while still firing with her free hand. Something inside Aurora froze, then hardened. She'd heard this before. 5 years earlier, another dying voice over the radio, another soldier bleeding out while she was too far to reach him. Not again. Aurora rose from the tower window, despite the incoming rounds slicing past. No more patience. No more careful pacing. She fired as fast as she could work the bolt. The machine gunner dropped. The officer shouting orders behind the trucks dropped. The radio operator calling for reinforcements dropped. A fighter lifting an RPG crumpled before he could pull the trigger. 30 rounds in a minute and a half. Some missed, but enough didn't. The serpent's formation disintegrated under the sudden fury. But Aurora was visible now, framed against the tower opening. An enemy sniper, one she'd tagged earlier as a threat but hadn't handled yet, finally saw his moment. His shot ripped into the stone beside her face, flinging shards across her cheek. Warm blood slid down her skin. He was good, and his second shot would be better. She found his hide. A second-floor window 200 meters away. The faint glint of his scope. The silhouette behind it. 2 snipers. 1 window each. Only one was walking away. Aurora didn't hesitate. She fired. The fight devolved into a frantic sniper duel. He shot. She shot. Both rounds missing each other by centimeters. Reload. Reacquire. Fire again. His round tore through the wooden frame, splinters stinging her shoulder. But she ignored the pain. She returned fire and saw his scope burst, saw him jerk backward. Threat neutralized. Aurora shifted immediately. The serpents were attempting to withdraw, shoving their wounded into the last working vehicles. She couldn't let them regroup. She aimed for the engines. Fluid sprayed. One vehicle caught fire. "All units, press them! Don't let them reform!" Aurora shouted through her radio. Delta team surged, hammering the collapsing line. The serpents finally broke, abandoning their casualties, their equipment, everything, scattering into the forest as individuals instead of a coordinated assault force. The battle was done. Aurora sagged back against the tower wall, suddenly aware of the pain anchoring itself through her shoulder and the blood drying on her cheek. Her muscles screamed in protest as the adrenaline drained from her system. Her hands trembled. Above her, the bell tolled one last heavy note, then stopped. Below, townspeople crept from their homes, shaken, wide-eyed, children in pajamas clutching their parents, all of them staring at burning trucks and bodies strewn across the snow, trying to comprehend the horror they'd narrowly escaped. Aurora keyed her radio. "Mason, status?" "Still alive." His voice was faint. "Walsh, stop the bleeding. Medevac inbound." It wasn't, not yet. But now that the gunfire was over, Aurora could finally call for extraction. "You're going to make it, Captain," she said. "Because of you, Spectre," he whispered. "You saved us. Saved them. Saved Christmas." Aurora looked down at the town. Families holding each other. Holiday decorations still glowing through smoke and cold air. Snow beginning to drift again, soft and quiet over the blood and brass. "Merry Christmas, Mason," she whispered. The medevac bird arrived half an hour later, alongside a quick reaction force that secured the area and swept the forest for any surviving serpents. Aurora stayed in the tower, providing overwatch until she was absolutely certain the threat was gone. By the time she descended, exhaustion had soaked into her bones like freezing water. 20 hours awake, little food, nothing but adrenaline and willpower keeping her upright. Her body was beginning to crash, begging her to stop moving. When she reached Delta Team, medics were lifting Mason onto a stretcher. His skin was pale, but somehow he managed a crooked smile. "The ghost of Winter Ridge lives up to her legend," he rasped. "You threw yourself in front of an explosion for Walsh," Aurora answered quietly. "That deserves recognition." "RPG, actually," Mason muttered, wincing as the medics adjusted him. "Felt like the right call at the time." He exhaled shakily. "They're saying 6 months of recovery, maybe longer." "Then you'll be home for next Christmas," Aurora said. Yeah, I will." He reached toward her and she took his hand. "Where will you be, Spectre?" She glanced at the town, the church tower, the quiet mountains rising behind them. 5 years she'd come back here, chasing some kind of peace she never managed to catch. Maybe it was time to stop returning. Somewhere warm, she said. Somewhere without snow. They both knew she didn't mean it. As dawn crept over the rooftops, townspeople stepped out carefully. An elderly woman in a robe approached Aurora first. She studied Aurora's bloodied face, torn gear, rifle still in hand, then wrapped her in a tight embrace. Aurora stood stiffly, unaccustomed to civilians touching her, unsure what to do, but the woman trembled against her and whispered words Aurora didn't understand. She didn't need translation. Gratitude had its own language. More villagers came. A man shook Parker's hand. A mother brought warm bread to Walsh. An old veteran saw the unit patch on Chen's sleeve and saluted with tears streaming down his cheeks. "They would have killed us all," the elderly woman said haltingly. You saved us." Aurora nodded, unable to swallow past the knot in her throat. An intelligence officer arrived shortly after. A tall man named Collins, briefed en route. He sifted through the seized documents, his expression growing darker with every page. "This Christmas offensive was far bigger than expected," he told Aurora. 12 coordinated assaults across 3 nations. If they'd pulled it off, he stopped. "Did they succeed anywhere?" Aurora asked. 2 bases took casualties before we got the warning out, Collins said. "But because of your team, we reinforced the other targets in time. You didn't just stop the massacre here. You shut down the entire operation." Aurora absorbed the information like data points on a chart. Lives saved. Casualties prevented. It should have meant something. It didn't. "There will be commendations," Collins added. "Medals. What you did." "I did my job," Aurora cut in. "Same as any soldier." "Ma'am, respectfully, what you did goes beyond. It was my job." Her tone ended the discussion. Collins knew a closed door when he hit one. He moved off to question the rest of the squad. Aurora left the gathering and walked past the burning vehicles and the rows of bodies waiting to be tagged. She climbed a small rise behind the church and sank into the snow, finally letting her muscles go slack. The sun was up now, painting the cold sky with streaks of gold and rose. Christmas morning. Across the country, children were tearing open gifts, families sipping coffee, houses filled with warmth and ordinary joys. They had no idea how close those simple moments had come to disappearing. Aurora thought of Daniel, of their last Christmas together, skating on the pond near home. He'd slipped and taken her with him, and they'd lain on the ice laughing until their ribs hurt. "I saved them," she whispered to the sky, hoping somehow her brother might hear. "I couldn't save you, but I saved them." The wind carried her words away. No reply came, but for the first time in 5 years, the crushing weight in her chest seemed lighter. 3 days later, Aurora returned to base. She slept through most of the helicopter ride, though her dreams were jagged flashes of her scope, the ringing bell, Mason choking out orders. Colonel Sarah Hendress met her at the landing pad. A hardened woman in her 50s, built from decades of command, Hendress regarded Aurora with something like respect. "Lieutenant Hale, welcome home." "Thank you, ma'am." "Walk with me." They crossed the compound in silence. Finally, Hendress stopped at the memorial wall, a long granite slab carved with the names of the fallen. Daniel's name sat 3 rows from the top. "I read the after-action report," Hendress said quietly. 43 confirmed kills in 6 hours. You dismantled 2 enemy units and stopped a massacre. That's extraordinary work." Aurora didn't answer. "The brass wants to nominate you for the Medal of Honor," Hendress continued. "I told them you'd likely decline." "You told them correctly, ma'am." Hendress gave a faint, knowing smile. "You and your brother are alike. He refused a Silver Star once. Said he was just doing his duty." Aurora's head snapped toward her. "You knew Daniel?" "I commanded him for 8 months, Hendress said, gesturing toward the names. "He was a damn fine soldier, and he adored you. Spoke of you constantly. His big sister, the sniper he bragged about. He was proud of you. Aurora felt her throat tighten. She clamped down on the feeling, burying it. He was better than me. No, Hendris said gently. He was different from you. But both of you served with honor. That's what matters. Hendris turned to face her fully. Lieutenant, I'm giving you a choice. Stay here and keep doing what you've been doing. Or I can pull strings for a transfer. Training command, stateside. No more frozen mountains. No more winter ops. It was a generous offer. A doorway out. A chance to finally step away. Aurora's eyes drifted to Daniel's name, etched into the stone. She thought of the townspeople who woke up alive because she'd been there. Of Mason, lying in a hospital bed. Of Walsh and Parker and Chen. Of every soldier who needed someone on a scope keeping death off their backs. I'll stay, she said quietly. You're sure? Someone has to. Hendris nodded solemnly. Then, I've got another task for you. A sniper training pipeline for new recruits. They need someone who understands real combat. Someone who can teach them more than marksmanship. Teach them how to survive. Teaching. Passing down experience. Preparing the next generation for the cold, the mountains, the impossible calls. Yes, ma'am, Aurora said. I'm interested. Good. You begin in 2 weeks. Enough time to finish your medical leave. Hendris handed her a folder. These are the student profiles. Look them over. A few of them remind me of you at their age. That's concerning, Aurora muttered, taking the folder. Thank you, Colonel. Don't thank me, Hendris replied. Thank the 200 civilians you saved. Thank the soldiers who came home because you gave them cover. Thank, she hesitated. Thank whoever gave you the guts to walk into fire when everyone else was pulling back. They stood there in silence, 2 soldiers paying tribute to the ones who never returned. Then Hendris saluted and walked off, leaving Aurora alone with the wall. Aurora rested her palm against Daniel's name, the stone ice cold. I'm going to train them right, she whispered. Make sure they come home. Make sure fewer names are carved here. A gust of wind rolled through, carrying the scent of more snow. Winter was on its way again. It always was. But Aurora Hale didn't fear winter anymore. 6 months later, she stood on a long-distance range, watching her trainees send rounds downfield. They were young, motivated, still learning that hitting steel on a sunny range wasn't the same as shooting when someone's firing back. 3-degree wind correction, she called to Private Emma Richardson, who was fighting a 1,000-meter shot. Slow your breathing. You're rushing it. Richardson adjusted, squeezed the trigger, and the steel target rang. Better. Again. Aurora's phone buzzed. A text from Mason. Fully healed and back in the field. Weather report says heavy snow next week. Guess who just got a mission? She smirked and typed, "Send coordinates." Another message popped up, this time from Walsh. "Heard you're teaching now." "Your students better than us?" Aurora replied. "Not yet. They will be." She looked up at the sky, clouds gathering, the unmistakable scent of approaching winter. For 5 years, she'd dreaded this season, tormented by memories of a Christmas when she'd been too far away to do anything. But last Christmas, she'd been exactly where she needed to be, and she'd made it matter. Her trainees kept firing, the steady ping of metal drifting across the range. The sound of preparation, the sound of future soldiers learning how to survive. Aurora walked the firing line, correcting grips, adjusting scopes, passing on lessons written in blood and snow, and shots no one should have been able to make. People called her the ghost of Winter Ridge after that Christmas fight. But legends weren't what counted. What counted was the next mission, the next shot, the next life saved because someone she trained was ready. Snowflakes started falling, light, melting as they touched the earth. The season's first snow. Aurora didn't tense, didn't stiffen. She just watched it drift down, quiet and soft, covering the world in white. Winter was coming, and she was.